Hey everyone, I'm Clue, and we're going to start a new branch of discussion concerning, well, not exactly the update portion, but print runs, right? So print runs are a real hot topic when it comes to Flesh and Blood, right? Because we all want to know how many cards are out there for each set, how many Fables, how many Marvels, and altogether, right, there's some interesting thoughts to be had concerning some of the print runs, right? So Monarch, how much is it in total? Everfest, Tales, same. Uprising Dynasty, how much did they shift the new model of printing when it came to Fab 2.0? Did they cut back? Did they maintain? Did they increase it even? But before we jump into the entirety of the print run, right, it is somewhat important that we circle back to Dusk Till Dawn, as it has just come out, and there are some interesting things to talk about in relation specifically to Dusk Till Dawn, and then how Dusk Till Dawn in itself slots into this table, as well as what it might create in terms of an outlook for Uprising, Dynasty, and Outsiders. Because when it comes to Dusk Till Dawn, right, we have a very important bit of information, and that is that there are 20 serialized art cards, and that the set is already out of print. Okay, so why is that relevant? Well, obviously, if the set's out of print, that means there is a set amount out there over all languages, but more importantly, in the English language, right, the Belgium and Japanese boxes, we have 20 serialized art cards, meaning if you could figure out the pull rates for these cards, you can figure out the actual total size of the print run, right? And we can get close to this, in all honesty, because we have a lot of the other numbers. And Dusk Till Dawn also has one other thing going for it, and that is this. The rares are 1.68 per pack, and then all the extra pools, right? So the legendaries, fables, your majestics, your extended arts, your cold foils, they all occupy one of those rare slots. Now, previously, in Dynasty, for instance, pulling a rainbow foil legendary, right? Having the pull rate didn't really do you any good because legendaries were split between the rare slot for the cold foil and then the premium foil slot for the rainbow foil. But seeing as all the high-end cards that are pulled in Dusk Till Dawn replace the rares, right, we can use this information along with some of these other pull rates to work out or get a rough idea of not only the print size, right, but the pull rates of a few other things. And altogether, right, we can calculate. And that's something I like to do, right? I like to do statistics and math. So what do I have? Well, I have an Excel spreadsheet right here for us to look over, right? So we have our pack, 1 Majestics are 1 in 4, Cold Foils are 1 in 24. Again, going off of the odds listed here, Legendaries are 1 in 64. Now, Legendaries, it's important to understand this figure and rationalize it, right? So when they refer to Legendaries as 1 in 64, that is the average pull rate across both the normal Rainbow Foil Legendaries and the Cold Foil Legendaries, right? So it's very apparent that in Dusk Till Dawn, the actual pull rate for Legendary Rainbow Foils is a bit more common than 164, right? On average, you probably end up around 2 a case, almost 1 guaranteed, 1.5 guaranteed, maybe something around there. Either way, it is definitely easier to pull than 1 per 64, right? It's probably in line with the other pull rates from the other sets. Okay, so the 1 in 64 is an average between both the Cold Foil pull rate and the Rainbow Foil pull rate. Now, what we've gone ahead and done, as you can see in some of the columns, right? We have converted the rate over, right, to the 0.25 or the rate per pack in relation to, again, the rare slot. So for instance, the rare over here, not on the Excel, over here, is 1.68. What does this tell us? Well, it means that the rare slot is 1.68 per pack, while the other slot, okay, when I say other, this encompasses all those extra pools. So your Majestics, Cold Foils, Legendaries, everything. Okay, so they make up 0.32. Now, this in itself is interesting to think about, because it means that roughly every pack, right, you're getting 0.32 of something else, okay? From there, what we can do is we can subtract the odds of other cards. So we know Majestics are 0.25 because they're 1 in 4 packs, right? So you open 4 packs, now this is 1. So we can subtract that from 1 pack, and we're left with 0.07, right? So this is now the pull rate for all those extra cards minus the Majestics. We do the same for the Cold Foil slot and the Legendary slot because we have the known pull rates provided by Legend Story Studios. So what this means is we end up with the other slot, right? So we take out the Majestics, the Cold Foils, and the Legendaries, the other slot encompassing Extended Art Majestics, Rainbow Foil Fables, Marvels, Cold Foil Fables, and of course the illustrious serialized art cards, right, that other pull rate is now this, 0.0127. Okay, and this number is more relevant, right? Because we can use this number to figure something out. For instance, if I go 1 divided by this number, right, we get 78. Do you know what 78 tells us? It means that per 78 packs, or 79 closer, right, if you're around, we are going to find something, right? Something on this other side of the coin, right? Not a cold foil, not a majestic. We're going to find one of these other cards in every 78 packs. Okay, in every 78 packs, so every, was that 3 boxes, basically? Right, did I do my math right? 72. So almost 4 boxes. You are meant to find a legendary, extended art, a rainbow foil fabled, a marble, a cold foil fabled, or a serialized art card. Okay, so we have a new defined rate of a rarity, right? Something that we can, again, work out and is tangible, right? We are given some of the pull rates in the other sets. So for instance, for rares, I think it was 1.75, but that in itself only factored in the majestics, right? The majestic pull rate. This is the first time where we are actually given that extra little bit, being that 0.07, which we then can again calculate these pull rates, right? And now this is where it's somewhat of a guessing game, right? We have to factor in our own understandings, our own theoretical pull rates, or rational pull rates for the extended art majestics, the rainbow foil fable, the marble, and the cold foil fable, if we do want to end up with the serialized art card. But I do think it is worth noting that in a case, not only are you going to most likely find 1 to 2 legendaries, the rainbow foil variety, you are also almost guaranteed to find one of these extra cards, right? Now, I say almost, right, because we all know that the odds in Dusk Till Dawn are probably the most randomized they have ever been, right? Some cases can be really good. I have not had any of those cases. I have barely pulled anything on the high end. I think overall I have 4 marbles and 3 extended art majestics over 12 cases, right? So there's been some people who've pulled a couple angels from one case. There's been people who've obviously found the fable, right? They are very randomized, it seems, in Dusk Till Dawn, which is good. It means the pack feel, your ability to go out, buy loose packs, to buy a box instead of a case, actually feels decent. But it is worth noting, again, this rate of 78 packs to find one of these extra cards. Now, as I was saying, we can essentially attribute whatever numbers we want to these. So for instance, we could say that the extended art is 1 a case, right? If B. So 1 in 96 packs. Okay, we then take that ratio out of the pull rate, right? So instead of 0.127, we now have 0.00229, right? This is the leftover pull rate for now the fables, the marvel, and the serialized art cards. We can then go ahead and do the same for the fable, right? We'll say it's a case again, even though it's not, okay? But now we get this issue, right? We have the negative number, okay? Packs cannot exist when it is negative because there's nothing left over to allocate to the marvel or the cold foil fable, these other slots. So what this means is we can roughly figure out a minimum, right? Again, we know that everything, all 4 of these slots, or sorry, all 5, including the serialized art card, has to average out to 78 packs. Okay, that is what the pull rates are telling us, you know, unless these are drastically wrong, which, you know, they could be, but seeing as they are presented to us in this manner, you can say with some degree of certainty that this 78 pack number is irrefutable. Okay, so again, they have to average out. Meaning, okay, this is where it starts getting interesting. One of these numbers, at the very least, has to be less than 78, right? Most likely the extended art majestics. Again, personally, I have found 3 in 12 cases, so that puts it at quite a high rate. The other thing worth possibly noting is the cold foil slot, right? So 1 in 24. Now, again, my understanding is that this legendary rate, 1 in 64, is the average of the rainbow foil and cold foil. But as for the normal cold foil slot, does this include, for instance, the spoiled skullcap, right? Which of course comes in extended art, or is that covered in a different pull rate? There are obviously some unknown variables still. Again, going off of this list and my personal understanding, right? Cold foil is all the cold foil cards minus the legendaries, because the legendaries are the legendary cards. We know that the rainbow foil is, again, easier to pull than 1 in 64. So I have no problem asserting that this is the average between the Rainbow Foil and Cold Foil. So I do think that this is accurate, that only the Extended Art Majestics, because there are the 3 varieties of those cards, right? So you have your normal, your Rainbow Foil, which is that premium foil slot, and then the Extended Art. Similarly for the Cold Foil Legendaries, to make my case, right? They don't have 3 versions. Right, there's only the normal, and then in some cases of X card for the legendaries, there is the extended art version. So because there are still just those 2 versions, Rainbow Foil, Cold Foil, I am still happy to say that they are 1 in 64 on average. So altogether, what does this mean? Well, it means, in all honesty, I could just play around with the numbers again till I get a rate I like, right? If I wanted to present to you that I think that the Serialized Art cards are X pull rate, and therefore the display size, the total displays for the set is X, I could easily do that, right? We could manufacture the odds all we want. We could also state that, given a lot of the fields, the Marvel is roughly 96 to probably 144, right? A case to a case and a half, something like that, or even maybe 2 cases, 1 to 2 cases to find a Marvel. Altogether, again, we'd have to collectively come together, right? Average out all our pull rates, and even then we probably wouldn't get close, because again, it's still going to be a small sample size in proportion to the total print run. But again, we have that minimum, 78, right? All of these have to average out to 78. Right, so how's that? Does that seem reasonable? Yeah, sorry, I keep saying average, right? Weighted average. So for instance, this is 1 over 144, right? This is 1 over 192. You'd have to make them equivalent, so this would no longer be 1 over 144, right? It would be 1.xx over 1.92. And then you'd have that together, so it'd be 2 point blah 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 over 1.92, and then that would equal the 78. That's the weighted average. But still, okay. So right now we're at 150,000 displays, right? The serialized art card, the pull rate is 1 in 1.8 million. Did I count right? Is that right? No, sorry. 1 in 180,000 packs, right? So packs, cases. Sorry, not cases, displays. Right, and then cases would be that's divided by 4, right? So the total number of cases. Not that we ever use cases, but yeah, for reference. I should probably move them down, right? So they're actually in line with the actual column. There we go. Okay. No, you don't want to carry the math over. That's fine. There we go. Second time's a charm. Okay. So yeah, so I can tinker with these numbers and I can present either argument. If I want to say it's short printed, right? It's a low volume, or if it's extremely high. We can tinker with it all we want. We could come up with realistic, again, odds for, say, the Marvel being, again, 1 case to 2 cases, something around there, with the foil Fable and the Cold Foil Fable. Similar. Speaking of which, right, where do you sit? Okay, do you think the Rainbow Foil Fable is more common than the Marvel? Or do you think Marvel's more common than the Rainbow Foil Fable? I would reverse this, right? I'd go Marvel, Rainbow Foil Fable, Cold Foil Fable. Just because there's only 1 Rainbow Foil Fable versus the whole rotation of Marvels to cycle through, right? So overall, I would say they're more common. But yeah, either argument, doesn't really matter, right? I think what's more important to talk about is speculating upon either size of print, right? If it's in the 300,000s, if that, right? I think the majority of us settle somewhere between here, 200,000 to 250,000, all of which is still somewhat worrisome, right? If you were to rationalize and think about it. So for instance, we know the pull rates for legendaries, right? 1 in 64, and we know there are 8 legendaries, okay? So for instance, this is 50,000 displays, okay? We'd easily just go and times that by 24, and that would give us the amount of packs, okay? So yeah, was that 1.2 million? Did I count the zeros right this time? I think I did, right? So 1.2 million packs. We could then easily take that and divide it by the 64, right? So there are, in total population, 18,750 legendaries, right? We could then take it a step further, and we could go ahead and divide that by 8. Okay, so for each legendary, there is roughly 2,300 copies. 2,300 copies of each legendary of Dusk Till Dawn, right? At 50,000 boxes, right? In the extreme low end. How do you feel about that number, right? Do you think it's decent? Do you think it's too much, potentially, right? If we have niche legendaries, right? We already have some other legendaries that contest slots and whatnot that you might want to swap in, swap out, that are useful in certain archetypes, right? Put the crown aside, because we all know the crown is busted. Every other legendary, especially the specific class ones, so Light Illusionist, Light Warrior, Shadow Brute, right? Specific one hero only can utilize this card, okay? Do you think that there are 2,343 players out there who want a copy of that Realm Before Legendary? To me, that feels a bit high. Again, right, because of the segmentation within Flesh and Blood, right? Dusk Till Dawn does not act like a normal supplemental set. It does not support 100% of play, right? At best, you could say it supports 58%, right? If you factor in the singular or duo cards for X hero, okay? And then at worst, 29%. If you just focus on the 4 core heroes, it does support. So in terms of printing, we usually think that supplemental sets are higher printed. At least I think that's the expectation, because again, they're meant to appeal to everyone. If Dusk Till Dawn, being a niche set, is treated like a supplemental set in terms of printing, okay, and we do end up with some of these higher numbers, well, that's where it gets a bit worrisome to me. I'm just going to change this, so obviously, well, can't even see, but I'm changing it so I can drag it along, right? Because if we do this, if we drag it along, okay, we get to that 200,000 range. There being close to 10,000 copies of each legendary in circulation. And again, it's going to be more because the Rainbow Falls aren't 1 in 64, right? They're more common than 1 in 64. So it's going to be greater than these numbers. But even at these numbers, if there are 200,000 boxes of Dusk Till Dawn in circulation, if the majority of them, if 50%, if 30% are actually open, right? This would be 25%. Again, same argument. Do we need 2,343 copies of each class-specific legendary, right? Because again, Dusk Till Dawn has these high-end chase cards where a lot of people were hyped, right? A lot of people were interested in opening large amounts of the sets, right? I would say that across the board, a lot more people have opened Dusk Till Dawn than of previous sets, because again, the buzz circulating it, right? Finding the Heroes Archons, finding the new Marvels, right? That are meant to be, again, the most majestic Marvels ever. Altogether, I would say that the amount of products actually consumed for Dusk Till Dawn would be higher than any of the other products, right? Higher than Outsiders, higher than Dynasty, higher than Uprising, okay? And given those numbers, right? If we land in the print size somewhere like this, again, even if, say, 25% are opened, this amount of legendaries, right? Rainbow Fall Legendary is currently at around $30. How do you feel, right? Dusk Till Dawn is a highly niche set. It is not going to last in a month, in 2 months. Yes, there'll be people who come back, revisit, open for X cards, but it's not draftable, right? There's no point to picking it up, in a month's time to have fun with your friends or, play at an LGS. There's no events to be run with Dusk Till Dawn. There is only opening. And not only do we have, again, this high circulation rate that I think is greater than the population, right? I know the player base is far greater than these numbers, don't get me wrong. But again, take a Soul Bond result, for instance, for Bolton, right? How many Bolton players do you think are out there? How many Bolton players then do you think actually play at a competitive level where they go out of their way to get this card, right? Where they don't just show up to their local game store, play with the deck on hand, play with whatever cards they pull, but actually go out of their way to find this card. I think it is concerning. Now, on the flip side, right, whatever the cold fall rates end up being, because they do feel a bit more hard to pull than previous sets, right? They could be desired, they could be collectible, and that's great. But again, Flesh and Blood is a very, very fine balancing act because of its design, because of its model, because it is more catered to expansions and alternatives rather than the lottery model. Having this amount of legendaries in circulation on the extreme or on the low end, I think is still too great for the play base. I think that talking and discussing about print runs, just on face value of print runs, is not going to do the justice. Rather, we need to talk about the segmentation, right? We need to talk about how many segments of the play community each set reaches versus its print run. No set should be printed equivalent. No set should grow equivalently, right? To have Everfest printed greater than Crew is fine because, again, the old model of supplemental sets, they approached and they spoke to 100% of the player base, because again, they had cards catering to 100%, right? Their actual contents were split evenly between that amount of players. Dusk Till Dawn isn't. Outsiders isn't. None of the standard sets are catering to every player. So unless you factor in both growth as well as that amount of segmentation in the set, we have a growing concern, again, to me, about the print runs of Flesh and Blood, because they can't just be exponential. And if they're not, again, exponential or similar or anything like that, you run into back-end issues for the company, right? Which is a whole nother discussion. But these numbers, right? How do you feel? If, again, anywhere between 2,000 to a whopping, again, if you're on the high end, right? We'll use this, right? Anywhere between 2,000 and 10,000 copies of every legendary from Dusk Till Dawn circulating as Rainbow Foil, right? Even if only 25% are open, okay? If you look at the low end, so 500 of each, definitely not. But of 10,000, right? 2,500 circulating. Is that too many? So it's an interesting thought to have. Anyway, if you want to, play around, figure out your numbers, I would not split them up like this, right? I would just do Marvel, Fable, and Serialized Art Card. I think that's a lot easier, right? If I cut this out and just join these two, you can plug in, say, case and a half, so 144 packs for Marvel, and then whatever you want for Fable. Fine. Let me reorganize this, and we'll do it that way for a second. There we go. First run at it, right? So Marvel's 2 cases, okay? That leaves the Fable having to average out at 134 packs. And even then, we get a total population in packs of 26,000, which is obviously not correct. I doubt it is that small of a print size. I'm pretty sure that Legend Story Studios would probably lose some of their contracts if they were only requesting that much to be printed, right? So again, you have to tinker with it. You have to think about it. And in all honesty, you do kind of have to factor in the extended art Majestics, because they are going to have a pull rate at least close to the Marvels, maybe. Again, probably a lot easier than pulling Marvels. So at 144, case and a half, right? We now have to get this number slightly less equal to this number, right? So again, I've just been tossing in random numbers, right? So that's 0.02, that's way too great. 400 brings us to 2.5, right? So back to 200. There we go, 5.5. It's a bit better, right? Only 1,300 packs. That sounds right, doesn't it? 196. Get in there. 188. Nope, still not enough. 180. Oh, look at that. Getting somewhere. 179. Nope, still kind of ridiculously low. Again, I'm not doing decimals either, so that's another thing you might want to consider. You shouldn't have to. Again, you just have to add in those extra categories and really specify, really knuckle down, if you will. And I don't know, if you want to play around with it, super easy, right? You're just minusing the pull rates from, again, that other section. So we know rares are 1.68, leaving 0.32 as the pull rate in a pack for all these other cards. And then you just take out the Majestics, Cold Foil, Legendaries, and play around with the pull rates of everything else. See what you get, see what you find. Again, print run aside, right? I think the total population of cards is a bit more impactful, a bit more important to talk about and think about. Anyway, hope you enjoyed.